welcome. Thank you for tuning in. This is Dr. Sean Yoder, and this is EC201. Today we're going to be doing chapters 9 and 10 together in this one lecture. So we're going to be doing long-run firm, and then we're going to stop for a second and switch and talk about the the input markets in chapter 10. So here we go. All right, caffeinated beverage of choice in hand, clicks up, and here we go. So whenever we do long-run considerations, remember, firms can choose the scale of plant, they can change any or all inputs, they're free to leave the industry. So they're less constrained, but remember, because of this, because there's no fixed input, there is no fixed cost in the short run. Fixed cost is only, no fixed cost in the long run. Fixed costs are only short run phenomena. Now, directors, C-levels tend to focus on long run. Some managers have to juggle both short run and long run. When we study long run, there are basically 4 different conditions that we need to look at. The first are firms that earn economic profits in the short run. Here's a hint. If you're earning economics in the profits in the short run, you tend to expand, but also you tend to attract competitors. Now, the one not listed here is the firms that are breaking even. In this case, if you're earning exactly a normal rate of return, now remember, normal rate of return is risk adjusted. But if you're earning a normal rate of return in your profits, you're not going to attract new competitors because they're like, well, that's okay, but that's not stellar. You're also not going to go out of business. But then there are 2 scenarios in the short run that we have to consider. The first are firms that are taking losses in the short run, but keep going in the short run to minimize their losses. But by the time they get to the long run, if the losses aren't resolved, you're out of there. You're out of business. And then the last one are firms that shut down and bear their losses in the short run. They just give the ghost, pay the short run costs. So we've got a lot to work through. I'll work you through all of these. Hang in there with me, okay? So the first condition of note are firms that are earning profits. So here's our car wash. Notice in our fixed costs, we've got the normal return to investors, and we have a maintenance contract, I guess. It's a fixed contract, fixed cost. So our fixed costs are $2,000. You got to pay your people, 800 car washes, labor, $1,000. Really? I only have to, what's that, $1.20 a car? How can I pay people for $1.20 a car wash? It's awesome. No, less for them. And you got to pay for your soap. So your total cost for 800 washes is $3,600. 800 washes at $5 a wash gives you revenue of $4,000. That leaves you with a net economic profit of $400. Now stop for a minute. As an investor, I was expecting $1,000. If I get $1,400 back on the next time, am I going to reinvest in this business or am I going to pull my money out? Well, clearly I'm going to reinvest. But because we're earning more money here, there's also incentive for somebody to open and become a competitor as well. So here we go. Price equals marginal cost. Well, remember, that's only true in perfect competition. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost is where every firm will do. But only because marginal revenue equals price can we get away with this now. So here's how this looks. here's the industry. You start here. Here's your demand curve. Here's your supply curve. Equilibrium price is $5. So the firm sees a demand curve. Price equals marginal revenue. Continuous line at $5. The firm will take marginal revenue equal to marginal cost that occurs at point A. Draw your vertical line there. So at 800 units, average revenue is $5. Your average cost is $4.50. That gives you 50 cents a car wash. Average profit. 50 cents times 800 is $400 profit. So if you're making profits, you have incentives to expand. But what if you're losing money? Well, if you're losing money and you get to the long run, you're going to be out of business. But what about the short run before you get to the long run? Has anybody known a farmer? Farmers live on this really knife's edge existence. Because sometimes they're losing money and they're like, I'm just trying to hold on to the farm. I'm trying to not go under. And then when it's good, it's like the good doesn't ever really fully offset the bad. So how does this work? Imagine I live here in Salem. Have you ever been to the Lancaster? Oh, no, they renamed it. It's not Lancaster Mall anymore. It's the Willamette Town Center. Woo. Yeah, renaming that sure helped. Have you ever been in that place? It's like the mall that time forgot. It's like the 1980s and 90s. It probably was popular, but now it's like dead. So imagine I opened a store there. And I signed a year's lease. And I may have had the greatest business on earth. But the problem is, it's in Willamette Town Center. And so what do you think happened? Well, of course, I'm going to be losing money. But the question to me as the owner is this. Should I shut down the business and just pay out the lease I signed? Or should I keep going for the end of the year, hoping to make enough to offset the losses? Now, as long as I'm doing enough business to pay my workers, my utility bills, and everything else, I'm probably better off staying open for the rest of the year because I'm going to have a smaller loss than if I shut down right now. Makes sense? But what if I'm not getting enough business to even cover the employees or cover the utilities? In that case, I'm better off just shutting down now, paying out the lease. You know, the first rule of getting out of the ditch, quit digging deeper. You know, put down the shovel. Sort of a thing there. Same is true here. So the shutdown point is the point at the bottom of your average variable cost curve. Whatever price this is, market price, at that point and above, the firm will keep reducing. Now remember, this is the break-even point. Right there. That's your break-even point. So for all points above this line, above average total cost, the firm's getting economic profits. For all points below this, the firm's in loss. At this break-even point, and only that break-even point, is stationary. Now, there's no economic profits, but there are still accounting profits. But below this price, below the shutdown point price, the firm is not even going to produce. Why? Because it's just adding to its problems. Put down the shovel. So when we're talking about losses and production and loss in the short run, we're talking about this area right here. Now, in the short run, a firm will produce here, but not in the long run. So your short run industry supply curve, you just take all the firms above the shutdown price, in this case it's 450, all of their marginal cost curves, you add them together, and that becomes an industry supply curve. Same horizontal sum as we did back in chapter 3. Same idea. So this is a useful chart. It's greater, marginal revenue equals marginal cost, they will operate. They'll expand, but new firms enter. What happens if you're taking losses? As long as your revenue is above your variable costs, you'll operate until you get to the long run. When you get to the long run, you're out of business and possibly other firms are going out too. What happens in the long run if you shut down in the short run? You're out of business. So notice you're going to end up out of business if you're taking losses, if something doesn't switch. So here we get into a long-run average cost curve. Now, long-run average cost curves are very different than their short-run counterparts. In the short run, costs were increasing due to diminishing returns, right? It was due to that fixed factor, the fixed capital usually, and the diminishing returns with regards to that, and as you add more labor, they became less effective. But that story doesn't happen in the long run because there is no fixed factor. So the shape of the long run average cost curve has a totally different mechanism causing it than in the short run. In the long run, the mechanism is due to scale. In the long run, the mechanism is due to scale. If you can produce these scale ideas, there's a lot of different mechanisms that cause it. I'll give you a couple. The first is increasing returns to scale. In this case, getting bigger leads to lower costs. So this is the downward, if you can, let me show you a graph. This would be the increasing returns to scale portion here, the downward sloping bit, okay? Increasing returns to scale. But what causes increasing returns to scale? A couple things. Let's say we both have businesses that make the same product, and we decide to merge our businesses, right? First order of business, do I need 2 IT departments separate? No. We'll make 1 IT department and probably we'll lose a few people along the way. We don't need 2 HR departments. We don't need 2 accounting departments. Probably bigger than what one of us was, but we don't need 2 solid ones. Also for inputs. You were buying inputs, I was buying inputs, raw materials. But now we can negotiate together, and because we're now asking for a bigger contract, we could probably get it at a lower average price. That's increasing returns to scale. Constant returns to scale means you can get bigger or smaller, it's the same cost. You could just go ditto, 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 as big or as small as you want, you have the same returns. But then you've got this decreasing returns to scale. Decreasing returns to scale is the upward sloping side of the smiley face. Getting bigger leads to higher cost per unit. What's that? Well, sometimes it's increased quality control, increased regulation. A lot of times it's because you're so big you get regulated more. But sometimes you're just so big, you have so many accounting controls and other things that you can't be as nimble as you were when you were smaller. So notice it's the scale of production that leads to the shape of your long-run average cost curve, not the diminishing returns. So the minimum efficient scale is the smallest size you can get to this lowest long-run average cost. Whenever you start up a business, this is your first job. If you can get to this point, if you can get your production up to this point, to the minimum efficient scale, odds are you'll survive. If you cannot get there, you're going to get kneecapped by someone who can. They're just going to underprice you, undercut you, and you're gone. But if you can get there, you're good. So what would the minimum efficient scale on this graph be? Well, notice 150 and 100,000 units of output. Those are about the same scale cost. So minimum efficient scale is first of all, you got to be at the bottom of long run average cost. These two are. And then you want the one farthest to the left. So that would be 100,000. If this business could get to 100,000 units of output, it'll probably survive. If it's stuck up here at 50,000, any other business that could get down here to 100,000 can sell much lower cost than this business, and so this business will probably go under. Constant returns to scale means you just go, you can get bigger or smaller, it doesn't matter. So in this case, between 100 and 150, that's a constant return to scale region right here. It's nice and flat. And then you may have diseconomies set in at a much higher point. Okay. What about schools? In the 1940s, there were 100,000 school districts, and there were 10,000 school districts by the late 90s. What were they doing? Well, for every school district, you need a school district administrator, school, board of education. You need all the records and administration for the separate school district. So they consolidated districts, and the hope was expanding the number of students with the same amount of fixed costs would be better. However, because they were big school districts, you had to please more people, so there were more bureaucracy. And that drove up costs and may have lowered quality. So there may actually have been diseconomies in schools. Sometimes getting bigger isn't always better. So what's the optimal scale? The optimal scale of whatever plant you're putting together is the one that minimizes the long run average cost. In this case, that's right here, down at Q star. Now, a long run equilibrium occurs when your short run average cost here, your short run marginal cost, and your long run average cost all intersect at the same point. This is not a long run equilibrium. They're not all at the same point. Likewise here, not all at the same point. This would be a long run equilibrium. But Professor Yoder, at Q star, what happens if you need to expand your business? What you do is you expand at this unit. So let's say you have a factory that's making at this quantity. You would just take that factory and you'd go ditto, maybe one on the East Coast, or maybe one in Europe, or maybe one closer to a different market. But you wouldn't make it smaller because it would be inefficient. You would make it larger because it would be inefficient. If you opened, it would have to be able to sustain this level at a minimum. Okay. But what about, you said that that was a long run equilibrium. What about moving in and out of equilibrium? What happens? Now guys, what I'm about to cover is critical. It's critical for the accreditation exercise at the end, so make sure you pay attention here. So we're going to start, here's our demand curve, here's our supply curve. Equilibrium price is $6, original units of output is 200,000. Here's the firm, long run, short run, marginal. Notice they all converge from this point. So it's $6, each firm produces 2,000 units. How many firms are there? 100. 100 times 2 firms times 2,000 for each firm equals 200,000. So notice the supply, quantity supplied at $6 for each of the firms meets the market supply, meets the market demand, and the market clears. But now something happens. The demanders really want whatever this is, and the demand curve's just to the right. What could that be? It could be a wealth effect. Maybe the price of a substitute went up. Maybe, who knows? Equilibrium price increases to 10. Market now demands 220. At a price of 10, here's our price, which is marginal revenue. Equate that to marginal cost. Each firm now produces 2,200. Still 100 firms. We're good. Market clears correctly. Notice now this gray box, that's a short run profit. Notice the box doesn't come all the way down to the long run average cost. It's only a short run. And that becomes your profit. Now, because there are economic profits, firms look at that and go, dude, he's printing money. Look at all that cash he's making. I want me some of that. What happens? New firms come in. So because new firms come in, the supply curve shifts to the right until we get back to $6. At $6, firms are efficient again. They're earning a normal rate of return, zero economic profit, each producing 2,000. So they're producing efficiently. But notice what happened. Instead of 100 firms, we have 120 firms. 120 firms times 2,000 gives us enough to clear the market. So notice what is going on here. Entry and exit of firms, as we attract more firms or firms go out of business, it's going to shift the supply curve to respond to bring us back to the efficient point of production for the firm, which is $6. If demand goes up, there are going to be economic profits. The profits are going to attract new firms to push the price down. What happened? As Apple was making big profits with the iPhone, those profits attracted Samsung into the smartphone industry, started pushing profits down. So the entry and exit of firms in the long run is the mechanism, the free entry and exit of firms is the mechanism by which profitability, economic profits are squeezed out, and we get back to efficiency. So in equilibrium, these three things are true, and due to no excess profits, your equilibrium price is equal to those. Okay. That's chapter 9. Be sure you go through the review questions and the extra study review questions that I put up on the learning management system. You'll be glad you did. So here we go to chapter 10. So I need you to stop and just kind of shake the mental snow globe in your head for a second. We got to reset. We got to mentally purge because we got to flip. We're now going to be in input markets, okay? Remember, in the input markets, firms are demanders, and households, you and I, are suppliers. A lot of the questions that are missed on this next exam come from people forgetting that firms are demanders and households are suppliers. Now, demand for workers in the input market is not a pure demand. Firms don't wake up one day and go, dude, I just like Dr. Yoder. I totally want to just hire him. So I'm just going to go hire him. I don't really care what he does. He's so cool, right? Okay, stop laughing, please. Stop. Okay, can you please stop laughing now? Yeah, I know it's, okay. Right? No. Firms demand labor because people demand what the firms make. The firm only demands your labor if what you make or help produce is in demand. Guys, this is the number one thing I need you to know when you get out of college, okay? Remember, Your job only exists if people want what your business makes. Now, how much of an input a firm demands is tied directly to how productive that input is in making whatever it is the firm makes. So the first thing we need to do, back in Chapter 7, make a note in your, write down in your lectures, if you need to review marginal product of labor, we did this in Chapter 7. So you can go back and look at that if you need. Marginal product of labor, when we did this back in Chapter 7, we did it with sandwiches. The problem is, I don't want to be paid in sandwiches. So we're going to make a new metric. Marginal revenue product or value marginal product, they're the same thing. The only difference is where you went to graduate school. I speak both, don't worry. But the marginal revenue product of labor is the marginal product of labor times P sub X. Now, this is not the price of X itself. A little different. Well, I'll talk to you about it in a second. But this metric, the marginal revenue product of labor, is critical. So here we have the sandwiches. So columns 1, 2, and 3, guys, I lifted straight out of Chapter 7. So remember, the 6th employee had 0 marginal product of sandwiches. Okay. Now this is, P sub X is the value added per sandwich. So I want you to think of it like this way. Have you ever been to Starbucks and seen those kind of, you know, like the Lunchable boxes? They call them bistro boxes, which are basically do-it-yourself sandwich kits, right? So the job of making the sandwich is to rip that thing open, assemble the sandwich, wrap it up, and then you sell it. And you can sell the handmade sandwich for 50 cents more than the bistro box. Okay, so we're not selling sandwiches for 50 cents. This is the additional price from having you assemble it versus having all those individual parts. For those of you who go to the grocery store, right? You can go buy a loaf of bread, you can go buy the cheese, you can go have the cheese slice at the deli, you can go. So you could do all that individually, or you could have them make the sandwich for you. Same idea. Just go to the deli counter, say, I like a sandwich, here's what I want on it. They assemble it for you, they give you the price. So in this case, the value add is just 50 cents. So the first worker gives you 10 sandwiches per hour, marginal product, 10 sandwiches. The value add is 50 cents. So the marginal revenue product of that employee is $5. Second worker gives me 15 additional sandwiches times 50 cents, 750. So notice column 5 is just 3 times 4. So 10 times 50 cents is $5. 5 times 50 cents is $2.50. Okay. Now, let's say, for example, back when I was in school, minimum wage, the state minimum wage where I lived was $2.35. Yep. So, if the business hires the first employee, they're getting $5 of additional revenue for that employee, and it costs them $2.85. Will they do it? Yes. Hire employee 1. Will they hire employee 2? You get $7.50 in additional revenue, and it costs you $2.85. Will you do it? Yes. Hire employee 2. Employee 3, you get $5 in additional revenue, costs you $2.85. Will you do it? Yes. Hire employee 3. Fourth employee, you get $2.50 in additional revenue, and if it costs you $2.85, no, you don't hire employee 4. That's how this works. Now, guys, this process works for everything like advertising. Do I advertise on TV? Okay. What is the additional value add? Okay, work through it, do your marginal analysis. There's a special question in your Chapter 10 online homework on my Econ Lab for advertising. Guys, that's a really good one. For those of you who are going to be managers, you got to get that question and think of it that way. It's really going to help. So here's your marginal productivity graph. Again, units of labor on the x-axis. Notice this is marginal product, or in our case, sandwiches. But notice this is in dollars. So this graph has the exact same shape. If productivity improves here, this thing is going to shift. But also, if it becomes more profitable for some reason, that'll shift this to the right or to the left. Now, labor supply, that's you and me. We supply labor. So here's the labor market. Here's the number of people who want to work, the supply of labor. Here's the demand curve of labor. Equilibrium wage is $10. How many units of labor will the firm hire? You come across $10 till you go to the farthest to the right. There we go. It's 210 hours of labor. So in this case, you take the equilibrium wage rate, you come across to your marginal revenue product line, and that's going to tell you how many units of that particular input you need. Now, we've done this with labor. You can add a K for capital, or you could do A for land. It's the same idea. It's the exact same idea. So years ago, I'm going to tell you a American football story. So years ago, back in the glory days of my New England Patriots, I know, I'm old. So Tom Brady was trucking along. We were on our way to the next Super Bowl. And we traded, for some unknown reason to me, we let Jimmy Garoppolo out the door, traded him to San Francisco. So Jimmy Garoppolo goes into San Francisco. Now, at the time, San Francisco, to say they sucked is the understatement of the week. San Francisco was winless. It was pathetic. Their starting quarterback got hurt in San Francisco, and Jimmy Garoppolo came in. Started throwing touchdown passes. Didn't lose the game where Jimmy Garoppolo didn't start, but he came back. And then the next time when he started, he won. Then the time after that, he won. And the time after that, he won. In fact, they won out the rest of the season. So what happened? Jimmy Garoppolo's contract came up. And in the negotiations, Jimmy Garoppolo's agents could say, hey, guys, this many additional people came to the stands because Garoppolo was on the team and the team started winning. This many additional viewers were on TV and you got extra advertising revenue because of it. This many additional jerseys sold over what was selling before because Garoppolo's here. Here is the marginal revenue product of Jimmy Garoppolo. Pay him. And he was able to negotiate a very big contract. So one of the things I like to do when I have a job is I keep a notebook. And one of the things I do in my notebook is I track all the additional things I do that add value to the business. Oh, I did this and lowered the cost of doing this for the business. Or, oh, I did this and got additional money for the business by doing this. And then when the annual review comes, I walk in and say, I'd like a raise. But, oh, well, we're going to give you this cost of living. That's great. That's cost of living. I want an additional raise. Here's all the money I've made the business in addition to my normal job or saved the business. May I have this certain percentage that's reasonable? And because I can quantify the money, a lot of times I get my raise. Now, in the case of Jimmy Garoppolo, it was very clear what the marginal revenue product was. They got to basically test him out before. Now, in the draft, teams tend to overpay for top picks. Why? They're college football guys. It's hard to know whether they're going to make it at the NFL, especially quarterbacks. So the better value usually is in the second, third, fourth rounds, especially if you're good at coaching. Now, we're treating the labor market as one labor market. In practice, there are many. I'm not going to abuse you with 15 different labor markets. It's not worth, in a 201 class, that's not worth putting you through. But there are many different labor markets. College educated versus not, specialized skills versus unspecialized skills. In the end, firms will only hire workers as long as the value of their product exceeds the market wage. Period. A firm's not going to hire you for charity. They have to make money in doing it. Land is much the same. Now, there's a fixed supply of land. Here's the demand curve for land. So here's the rental price per acre. So at that price, if the firm can plant and grow whatever they need at above that price, there you go. Otherwise not. So the marginal revenue product for land in acres has got to be equal to the rental price or the price of the land. This works with capital as well. So remember, case of labor, marginal revenue product of labor is the product times the price. And in the end, all of these have to equate. The marginal revenue product of land is the price. All of these have to equate. And when we're done, you end up with the firm version of the Bliss equation that we talked about in Chapter 7. We just added land here. If one of these, if there's an inequality, Pac-Man eats what you want more of. But this is the most profitable way for a firm to buy labor, capital, and land in whatever combination to realize the highest profits. Now, as a worker, you're probably really interested in this variable here, price of labor. Well, if your productivity goes up, price of labor can go up to keep this equation balanced. Why do I keep my notebook? I'm showing my productivity went up. But if the price of capital and price of land go up, well, maybe I can get some more hours here, or maybe there's other things we can do. All different methods. But remember, if you're interested in this equation, you can pay attention to the rest of these, because that's going to tell you when's a good time to ask for more hours or when's a good time to ask for a pay raise. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate you. Coming up is your next exam. Please get your homework done and call me if you have questions before the exam. Take care.